So imagine being me. Hot, sexy, smart, muscular, a little too hairy, and always right about everything. And you're trying to find a photo you'll include in a video. Google image search for some reason decides to be shady and show you this. You're like, huh. PPE, interesting. Let's see if any credit is given. Oh, would you look at that? It's not. You are also well aware that almost all accounts or channels using your way of analyzing Drag Race and butchering it in the process, making it lose any nuance, don't give you credit. There are some that do, but there's so few of them that they would be considered a statistical anomaly and would be discarded in any research. What would you do in this situation? Well, let me tell you what I'm going to do. Nothing. If you would like to help the channel, since YouTube hates its creators, you can like this video or dislike it for all I care. Leave a comment and, of course, make sure you're subscribed. You can also become a member of the channel, and I want to thank all these lovely people here who have become members. They have seen this video before the rest of you, and they already have other videos to watch, some of those videos being channel exclusive content. Now, let's get back to the video. I've kind of given up on shadowboxing people stealing my ideas and analyses. It does annoy me to no end that those people tend to get more clicks, likes, views, whatever, and therefore more money for doing half the work and erasing all the nuance. And yes, partially it is because of the money earned. It would be lovely to get even more ad revenue for the years of work I've done, but it's also because it's dumbing down something that can be very interesting and layered. I've given up on it because it either leads to those said people getting offended that you would call them out and playing the victim, or I would get people yelling at me in the comments saying that I'm thinking too highly of myself and that I did not come up with this stuff. Baby girl, Google is free. Points per episode or PPE score, the concept of a competitive episode versus a filler episode, overall scores, percentage of maximum amount of points, comparing track records, mistreatment and favoritism discourse, or riggery, if you will, were not present in the Drag Race discourse before I started making videos. Although, even before that, since season 7, I very actively wrote about it all on Tumblr. Now, I know I'm not the first person to do points for placements or analyze the show in depth. After doing my own stuff, I did find people who did do it, but they either didn't stick with it, they made it a one and done kind of a venture, or they just didn't get enough traction, which is why I didn't see it. So let's not pretend I didn't popularize it. I know I'm never getting the credit for this, and I cannot expect newer audiences to go back to my videos from 7 years ago or time travel to 2015 and follow my Tumblr blog. But what I can do is kind of clickbait people with this title and then talk about maths and statistics. Okay, so you guys know my system. Highest placement gets the maximum, lowest gets 0 points. And the placements defined by the show are represented in the increments of 1. So eliminated 0 points, bottom 2 is 1 point, low is 2 points, etc. I give 1 point for a mini challenge win because in a lot of the cases, queens on the show actually get more screen time when they win mini challenges, and they often have more power in maxi challenges, making them more important to the story. So essentially, it's a way for a queen to force the producers to make her a more important part of an episode. And by them being a more important part of the episode, they might go even further and be a more important part of the season. I have seen point systems that go from 0 to 10, where a win is 10 points and an elimination is 0 points, and that could work, like totally, it does. It's essentially just the 0 to 5 system, but it's going up in increments of 2. But then we run into a problem when we calculate a PPE score. I'll use season 17's queens as examples in this video. So let's look at the winner, Anya Nerve. In my point system, her PPE score is 3.846153 recurring, and in that 0 to 10 score, it's 7.692307 recurring. In the 0 to 5 score, we can read her PPE score as being between 3 and 4, but nearing the PPE score of 4. Because the PPE score is simply the average value, or the mean, the number is telling us how Anya placed in the season on average. Seeing that she's between 3 and 4, but nearing 4, we can assume that if we pick an episode at random to watch, we can expect Anya to play safe, but more often than that, she'll be above the safe placement. However, 7.692307 recurring is between 7 and 8. What does 7 mean in this system? It's not a number we see in the 0 to 10 point system, and even though we know that number 7 exists between these two placements, it's not named, it's not defined. We don't know what 7 represents. Of course, you can read this as just nearing 8, therefore it's mostly high, and you would be correct, absolutely, but again, we have not defined the value of 7 in this point system. It's even worse when point systems don't have regular increments, so it's like 5 points for a high placement, 7 points for a win, but a safe placement is 2 points, and it's like, what? Why? Like, how did you get to that? Some might say that this is because there can be 6 safe queens in an episode, but only 2 high queens and 1 winner, or 1 high queen and 2 winners, and okay, but that's only a case for like 1, maybe 2 episodes. The amount of queens does not matter. It's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at the placements and the edits that the queens get with said placements. A safe placement in episode 1 will get you the same edit as a safe placement in episode 10. Even if in episode 1 you'd be one of 6 safe queens, but in episode 10 you would be the only safe queen. When there is a lack of consistency, it's not as intuitive to read the dataset, and it can be often viewed as a flawed system. And this point system here is giving me actual nightmares. Like, how did you get to this? But what's even worse is that there's at least 3,000 people that did not even question it. And I know, it's not that serious. But again, if you're gonna steal properly. Also, please do not round up to just 2 decimals. Round up to the amount of decimals of the number with the most unique amount of decimal points, because it's those little nuances in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th decimal spot that could change the ranking of queens. Also, don't define full values of your system with numbers with decimal points. Meaning, don't say that a high placement is, let's say, 3.5. We understand what 3 of something is, but we find it hard to understand what 3.5 of something is. We can assume what that 0.5 represents, but what do they say about assuming? That's right. They cut your balls off for that. We also don't do negative points. You could say that, yes, in theory, a -3 to 2 system is the same as the 0 to 5 system, because we just subtracted 3 from every point, and we got to -3 for elimination, -2 for bottom 2, -1 for low, 0 for safe, 1 for high, and 2 for win. 0 for safe even makes sense, you know, you were neither bad nor good, you got a mixed edit. You shouldn't be either rewarded nor punished for it. So, 0. Now that's all fine and dandy, but let's say someone finishes the season with 0 points. What percentage of points did this person earn in a 10 episode season? Do you have your answers? This one is hard, right? Yeah? Okay, let me help you out by giving you a more concrete example. Let's say a queen's track record is safe, win, high, eliminated. So 0 plus 2 plus 1 minus 3 equals 0. What percentage of points did this queen earn in a 10 episode season? Still no answer, huh? Alright, okay, let's translate that to my system. 0, the safe placement is 3 points to me. So, in theory, the queen in question ended the season with 3 points. Excluding mini challenge wins and possible returns later in the season, there are only 4 possible track records for that. Safe, eliminated. Low, bottom 2, eliminated. Bottom 2, low, eliminated. Bottom 2, bottom 2, bottom 2, eliminated. 2 and 3 are the same, essentially, as their PP scores are 1. For the first scenario, the PPE score is 2, and for the fourth scenario, it's 0.75. However, in the point system with negative points and a value of 0, there can be so many different track records that will amount to an overall sum of 0, and it can happen in as few as 1 episode or as many as 10 episodes. I don't know the exact answer of how many different track records can lead to that, but just try it for fun. Work with -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, and try to see just how many permutations of these numbers in up to 10 episodes can you make that give you a sum of 0. What's worse, all of these Queen's PPE scores will end up being 0, because if you divide 0 with anything, you'll still get 0. Similarly to that, a queen who was eliminated in episode 1 will have the same overall and average score as the queen who was safe for 9 episodes and then eliminated in episode 10. Because 0 times 9 plus -3 equals -3. Oh yeah, also, do you have the answer to the percentage question that I asked? Well, the thing is, you can't use 2 as the maximum here, which is what would be intuitive, right? Like, it's the highest number, it should be 100%. But 2 here is not 100%. 100% is the range between the lowest point and the highest point. 0 overall points, as I've said, can be achieved by different track records, but that doesn't mean that every track record of 0 is the same, especially once we include percentages. No placements should cancel each other out, because that's not how it works. Unless they're going to be the maximum or the minimum score, this is why we avoid using zeros here, because 0 means nothing. Like I mentioned, and like you probably already know, the PPE score is simply a mean. Why don't we use some other means of finding the average or the middle value, like a median or a mode? Well, we can use them, but not for the PPE score. They have to represent something else. Mode is the easiest to understand in this scenario, as it represents the most common value in a sequence. So it's the most common placement. Let's go back to Anya's track record. It goes safe, high, win, high, safe, win, high, low, safe, win, win, bottom 2, high. We're going to ignore many challenges here. Once we arrange Anya's placements from lowest to highest, we get bottom 2, low, safe, 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 high, 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 win, 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 win. Converting that to numbers, we get 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5. Mode is simply the most frequent value in a dataset, and Anya has multiple modes, 4 and 5. In this case, we can understand the mode as the most common placement for a queen. It's expected that the most common placement for most queens is going to be the safe placement, as it's the most common placement in the show. The least common placement, on the other hand, is the low placement. And from Season 17's queens, only one of them has the low placement as her most common placement. Can you guess which one? Lucky and Joella don't have a most common placement, as all the values in their track record are different. Only Sam and Anya's mode is above 3, with Sam's being 4 and Anya's being, like I just said, 4 and 5. Arrieri has the most modes, with 4 of them, given that she was eliminated twice, she was low twice, she was safe twice, and she was high twice. If the PPE score, or the mean, tells us the average placement of a queen, the median tells us the true average placement. Let's look at Anya again. Her median value is 4, as it quite literally separates the greater and lesser halves of her track record. And the same goes for Sam. Joella's median is 1, and her mean is 1.3 recurring. The median is kind of rounding up or rounding down the PPE score to what feels to be the average placement for a queen. Lucky's median and mean are the same, 1.5, and no queen has a median of 2. Corey's median is 2.5, but her mean is 2. And this is interesting here because when we look at Corey's track record, the 2 and 3 quite literally separate her bottom 2 placements from her safe placements. But I wouldn't say that Corey felt as being between low and safe in the season. To me, her track record and overall edit felt bottom 2 to low, so more in line with the mean, aka the PPE score. Acacia, Arrieri, Hormona, Jules, Lana, Lexi, Lydia, and Susie all have a median of 3. Again, safe is the most common placement, so it's bound to be the most common median. Crystal Envy, interestingly enough, has a median of 3.5. And this is one of those moments where a median feels more accurate than the mean, because Crystal had no low placements in the season, but her elimination. Her PPE score is 3, but before the elimination, she was consistently good or great. More commonly, she was high, which is more or less what the median is telling us. We can also look at the mid-range, which takes the highest and lowest value in a dataset and calculates its average. The higher the mid-range, the more successful you were at the competition. Although, once you hear who has the highest mid-range value, you'll realize that this is not the best description. The lowest mid-range value belongs to Acacia, Joella, Corey, and Lecky, as none of them ever placed above the safe placement, but they were all eliminated. This is actually the most common mid-range, as every other value, 2, 2.5, and 3 each have 3 queens track records to them. However, the highest mid-range belongs to Lexi Love, as her lowest placement was low and the highest is a win, so she has a mid-range of 3.5. Yeah, not as much great at competition as like being a production favorite. Even the strongest track record of the show, Bianca's, has a mid-range of 4, and I think, realistically speaking, that this is the highest mid-range value we can get. I guess it's possible to have a queen be high or win every episode, so in theory, we could have a mid-range of 4.5. However, a mid-range of 5, meaning a track record with just wins, is so improbable, we cannot even say that it would happen in theory. And that's it. That's the video. Honestly, the point of the video is simply think before you steal. It would be lovely to be given credit. Well, it would be even lovelier if y'all would stop using my content and work for your own monetary gain, but we are already too far gone for that. Anyway, every I thought gays couldn't do maths comment gets you a lifetime ban from commenting on here, because it's 2025. Why are you assuming anyone's sexuality? Why are you basing everything on stereotypes? I'm done being annoying. Thank you for watching.